This is Bamsters Rated R. My name is Peter Willington. I'm from Auric Digital, and unfortunately, this isn't the ASMR special.
Hello, guys, and welcome back. Welcome back to episode 99. Yes. Hope you guys had a great Christmas and Happy New Year. I've just crawled out from the rock that I was found under. I was, we just recently hit by another car today, so that was fun. This is the fifth one since I started this podcast. Yay! Today, guys, joining me is Drac. We've got some topics to discuss with you. Drac, say hi.
Hey there. Fifth one since starting the podcast. That sounds like an important distinction there. Like, this has happened so many times, but only 5 since the podcast started.
The podcast really is my lucky charm. You know. Oh, me lucky charms. That was a terrible accent. Anyway, Drac, Nintendo Switch.
Well, before we jump into that, I actually wanted to ask you something about the episode number.
Okay.
Do you ever have, like, words, or in this case, numbers, phrases, whatever, they get stuck in your head from something like a movie or a song or whatever, and then from that day forward, every time you hear that number or name, it refers your mind back to that experience?
99, red balloon. Da-da-da. I like the German version, though. That German version's a lot better.
Actually, that's another good point. That's not the one that gets stuck in my head for this one, though. Did you ever watch the Vin Diesel movie, 𝑥𝑥?
You mean that horrible film? Yes, I have watched it.
Oh, come on. The first one was kind of cool.
No, it wasn't, right? It started out like Fast and the Furious, which was pretty good, and then it just, quite literally, jumped off a bridge and kept on falling.
Yeah, but now every time I hear 99, I hear the guy from the was it Russians? Anarchy 99.
Yes, Drac. Right. Happy days. Yes. Carry on. You've got Nintendo rubbish to tell me.
And without further ado, I thought we'd bring this up just because I love poking at Bamm with this stuff. Since he so boldly claimed last year when the Nintendo Switch console came out that it was going to go up in flames and disappear. It's now the fastest selling console ever in US history, and it sold more in Japan than the Wii U ever did. Though I would think that's probably not much of a big surprise.
Bullshit. I'm calling bullshit on this. I seriously don't believe that in a second. You're sort of telling me that the Nintendo Switch outsold the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One.
Am I saying that they have sold more consoles than the Xbox One or the PlayStation One? No. Just the articles I was reading were saying that they are the fastest selling video game console ever. And I have a couple different sources for that.
Okay. Please tell me your sources so I can then go and burn them down to the ground because they're misleading you with shitty information.
Well, the 3 articles I was reading all this stuff on, one was from TechCrunch, another from Business Wire, and then the last one was from Polygon.
Okay, those are reputable sources that tend to do their homework when it comes to articles. Perhaps not Polygon so much, but they tend to be okay when it comes to their citations. Carry on, sir.
Well, I just thought you might like to know your prediction has gone down in flames.
No, I disagree there, right? When you come to buying a console, right, you buy a console. There's a PlayStation 4 Pro, which is the high-end spec of the console, and there's a PlayStation 4 standard one, which is the low-end spec of the, low end of the spectrum, right? So you've got a double whammy on the entry. You low-end PS4 for the entry level, PlayStation 4 Pro, all that stuff, right? Xbox doing the same thing with their Scorpion and Xbox, blah, blah, blah. When it comes to buying the Nintendo Switch, okay, you're buying a tablet. I can guarantee you other tablets, like any Android tablet, right? Actually, I can guarantee the Amazon Kindle Fire, whatever have you, outsold the Nintendo Switch. It is a tablet. You are buying a tablet. That is what you have purchased. You can't call it a console. It is a tablet. So no.
Does an Amazon Kindle come with a controller?
It actually, believe it or not, it does. It's called Alexa.
Alexa's not a controller. It's an AI.
Voice activated. Bang. It's a voice activated controller, boy. Get with the modern times.
I'm pretty sure that you can't connect your Kindle to your TV, or at least not without some kind of external device that doesn't come with the Kindle.
Actually, you can.
It comes with the Kindle.
You can. You can connect it to the TV, yes. You might need to have a fire stick. But you can connect it to the TV.
Did I not say you had to buy an external device?
Well, hang on. Is it not true with the Nintendo Switch you've got to buy almost every other second bloody arsehole thing accessory? if you want anything else on Nintendo Switch, right, you've got to buy it.
Yeah, I got to give you that one.
Every other accessory that makes the actual console functional, you've got to buy it. So I stand my ground when it says the Nintendo Switch is a tablet and it has not outsold the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox because they're consoles. The Nintendo Switch is a tablet and it has not outsold the other tablets. Other tablets are for multimedia, YouTubing, the random cheap nasty games you get on the Play Store or iTunes Store, whatever have you. That happens to be a tablet specific for gaming. So you get the two controllers, you get the 2 bits and pieces. It's a specific type of tablet, if you know what I mean.
I'm glad you actually bring that up because Nintendo does have their own marketplace and it's not just Nintendo games. They're also selling stuff from indie game developers, which I think is really cool. But, all those things that you listed as being classifications of console, this actually fits as well. But I will give this to you. It is more of a tablet, but the thing I love about that's one of the things that I love about it, and one of the reasons I think it has sold so well is because you can take it with you and use it just like a tablet. Or you can plug it into your computer, not your computer. You can plug it into your TV and, play it there just like you would any other console.
Yes, and that's the thing. A console is basically bolted to the arse end of your TV, right? That Nintendo Switch is a tablet and can be taken, it's mobile, it can be gamed on anywhere. Hell, there's an advert in the UK where the taxi drivers play ping pong with the Nintendo Switch. It was like, in which world will these London cabbies, right, on the street corner play ping pong with a Switch? 1, they'll be robbed, 2, they'll be robbed, and 3, they'll be robbed and their cars will be gone. There's no ways in hell. Never mind. Silly advert.
I don't know. I was in London, was it a little over a year ago, and it was like bulletproof glass and everything else. So I guess if they just stay inside the cab, they can play the Switch all they want.
They say it's bulletproof glass. What they really mean to say is actually styrofoam, and if you breathe too hard, it melts.
Oh, nice. Well, speaking of melting things, have you heard much? Do you even know much about the Meltdown or Spectre vulnerabilities?
Well, when you said Meltdown and Spectre, I honestly jumped straight to Netflix because there's a film on there called Spectre that I've always managed to watch the very first 5 minutes of and then been pulled away to do something else. And I'm pretty sure there's something else they called Meltdown. I think you're talking about a Netflix thing. But then you told me it's something else.
I thought you were going to go with James Bond.
No. I'm sure there's something on Netflix called Meltdown. I can't remember what it's called. Is it documentary section? I don't know. Anyway, I thought you about a Netflix thing. But then you tell me, no, Bamm. You haven't only just missed the mark. You're in a different freaking planet. Tell me about it. Tell me about it, dude. I'm way off base here, bro. Tell me about it.
Well, basically, there are folks out there that are constantly trying to find vulnerabilities with computers, and they report these things through different avenues. One of the big ones is Google. Then once this was reported, this guy reported the vulnerability that he found. There were other folks that were able to independently also verify that information. So basically, it's any processor made by Intel, or almost any processor made by Intel in the last 2 decades, is affected by, I think it's I keep getting the two mixed up, whether it's Meltdown or Spectre. Because one of them affects like PCs and then the other one affects like mobile devices. But because of these types of vulnerabilities, it will allow people to just like slide into programs and pull out data without the antivirus or any of that actually ever recognizing that they've done that. So the last couple decades, the way they've been developing these chips has been targeted towards speed. So if you think of speed and security being opposite ends of where a pendulum swings, for the last couple of decades now, Intel has swung that pendulum all the way over to speed because they didn't see or didn't think that they needed to worry as much about the security side of things, because I guess they figured that would all be handled by software. And these patches that have come out now, I'm reading, can reduce the speed of these processors by up to 30%. And there's been some other fallout from that now with games like Fortnite. I've been reading some of the Ubisoft games are now suffering from connectivity and performance issues, like Wildlands and other stuff that uses their Ubi Play service.
I got a question for you, Truck. When did these updates hit? Was it early December?
Let's see. I just started hearing about this the beginning of January. I think I might have seen something the end of December, but I think that the patches started to come out like right after the beginning of the year, maybe within the first week.
The reason why I say is because towards the beginning of December, maybe the middle of it, I was happily doing bits and pieces with my laptop, and suddenly it became brickified. So I'm thinking maybe because it was a Windows update that I did, and it was a freaking long, laborious, horrible update. And thinking back now after that, interesting you might say this.
Nah, this wasn't early December. This would have been very tail end December, if not the beginning of the year, and I think it was closer to the beginning of the year. But with regards to your laptop, are you sure you didn't have it in a backpack and get hit by a car or something this year?
Fucking, I tell you what, Jesus Christ, mate. It's not even, it's only what, the 7th? Only the 7th day of this year, and I've already felt the front end of someone else's motor vehicle. Jesus Christ.
I'm telling you, man, you need to start wearing one of those reflective, like, safety vests. We probably even need to get you one with, like, a battery pack that's got flashing LEDs on it.
Dude, I've told you, I'm not a retard. I don't need to wear these things, yeah? I was walking on the sidewalk, right, and some poor kid who was driving too quickly at the time, okay, sheet-assed on the road and stuff, doesn't know how to drive a car, mounts the curb, and knocked me over. Bastard.
Yeah, but none of this stuff happens to the rest of us. It just happens to you.
What can I say? Shit finds my face, bro.
Maybe, wasn't there was a movie somewhere where somebody had like a portable airbag that they would wear, and so like if you got hit, maybe it wasn't a movie, maybe it was some YouTube video I saw where like conceptual design stuff. But yeah, if you get hit, then the vest that you're wearing inflates like an airbag.
That's a motorcycle airbag, a biker airbag or something. That's basically inflates around the neck, supports the neck, inflates around the arms, whatever have you. They found that there's only one problem. Because the bag inflates so hard around your body and stuff, that your arms basically stick out. So you could quite literally have your arms snapped off.
Ooh.
So, yay to that. Yay.
Yeah, we don't want to do that. I want you to do the audio editing, not me.
You heard it here, folks. This week's editing audio extravaganza brought to you by me. Yes.
Well, we did mention Fortnite, and I say we wrap up this news or info block with a little info on... Have you ever played or heard of the game Paladins?
No, I have not heard of Paladins, but I'm very sure you're about to bore me to death with it.
I don't know enough about it to bore you to death with it, so...
Yay!
No, it's just that it seems like more and more games are starting to jump onto this, battle royale, battleground, arena type, deathmatch type deal. So Paladins is the next one that's going to dip their toe into it. They're adding a battleground or battle royale mode. And actually just this morning, and I wish I had saved the link, I need to try and find it again, but just this morning I was hearing that there are rumors that the next Halo game is potentially going to have a battle royale mode in it.
Dude, it would be silly not to. The battle royale thing started with the Japanese, right? With their movie, Battle Royale or whatever have you. It's become a bit of a cultural phenomenon, a bit like the zombies and the vampires and the Swamp Thing and all that stuff. So this is the next big thing in gaming, I reckon. So if you don't have a Battle Royale in your game, no one's going to buy it. I'm just surprised EA haven't latched onto this idea and somehow molded it into some sort of thing where they try and make you gamble anyway.
Well, isn't that what Battlefront is?
No. Battlefront, yes, it's a first-person shooter, against other people, but it's not a battle royale where one will rule them all type thing,
I do want to rewind just a quick second there. How did you go from, like, vampires to Swamp Thing? What the hell?
Well, listen, right. My brain, as we all know, is a maze of genius and brilliance, but it also has, odd moments of stupidity in there. We all know my ignorance is famous around the world, Well, we all know that. I went from, vampires, zombies, Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing was the thing in the 70s, wasn't it? There was a TV show. There was a cartoon. Swamp Thing was the thing.
Well, and
Swamp.
It's a comic book as well.
Yeah, that's true. Swamp Thing was a big thing. I'm surprised it hasn't come back yet. All the other Marvel superheroes and DC comic books, whatever, have got their thing. Where's Swamp Thing?
No, I've heard rumors from time to time that there were people who were wanting to make a Swamp Thing movie based on the comic book character, and it was supposed to be more of a horror type, which would be totally appropriate, I think, for that character.
That is exactly it. It's appropriate because It's horror, and zombies and vampires and all this other nonsense are horrors. You know, done. That's it. Swamp Thing's a horror. It's a horror comic. It's about, well, it's, in my view, it's supposed to be anyway, but, you know, Hollywood will do what they do best.
Well, I think that brings up kind of a point. Maybe I'll have to poke TJ and we'll talk about it on one of these comic shop talk blocks. But it seems, I'm you know, of course, there's a lot of people in Hollywood for one reason or another that are bitching and moaning about different, you know, how much it's saturated by superhero movies. But there's so much content out there, and we're starting to see in some cases where some of these studios are branching out into other than just your typical superhero genre type film. There's so much stories and content and other options where you could do horrors and westerns and you know, well, they've done sci-fi with Guardians, but there's a lot of other possibilities out there, and it doesn't have to be some super powered person. There's a lot of material to pull from.
Oh, I agree with you. My wife just said, "You never watch it though, Brett." You're damn right, Cookie. I wouldn't watch that. I hate horrors.
Well, and on that note, I guess we should probably turn it over or ask you guys to stick around past the break here, because Genius and I will be coming back with an interview from Peter Wellington from 𝙎𝙧𝙬𝙬𝙚 Digital. They worked on the game Ogre from 𝙒𝙤𝙤𝙬𝙬𝙬 Games. It's an old board game that was first released back in 1977. And these guys have brought it to the PC market now.
Yes, guys, sit back, relax. Let G and Drac take you on a whimsical adventure. Ta-ra!
Cheerio.
My name is Peter Wellington. I'm from 𝙎𝙧𝙬𝙬𝙬𝙬 Digital. This is Bammsters Rated R, and you are a very attractive human being. Thank you for listening.
And hey everybody, yeah, we're back with one of those interview thingies again. The first one of the year. And I think, let's take it a little bit different. With me we have Draconis. Hey Drac.
Hey G, good morning, good afternoon.
How do you feel about a little bit of a board game on a computer?
Well, I do tabletop role-playing on computers, so I don't see any reason why board games couldn't be any fun.
Well, joining us from 𝙎𝙧𝙬𝙬𝙬 Digital. I hope I'm pronouncing that one correctly. Yeah, he's there. It's Peter Wellington, and here to talk about Ogre, a game that's literally as old as me.
Hello. Yes, I'm here to talk about that. That's quite exciting, isn't it? It's a fun tabletop game. So you guys are like up for tabletop PC gaming, I'm assuming, strategy games, all that sort of stuff. Hype for that?
Yeah, I play a few RTSs from time to time. I would think that kind of thing would probably transition well. G mentioned it being as old as him. That's funny. I looked at the date and I was like, oh man, the original game is like 40 years old. And I went, crap, that's only a year older than me.
Marvelous.
Yeah, we should probably say, it's one of those things from way back when, before computers. So if anybody's sitting out there wondering, tabletop, what does that mean? You put a thing on a table and then you play on it by moving small pieces around. In this case, strategy game. And Ogre is one of those slightly different ones because in most of them, you get, let's take chess as an example, you get an identical number of pieces on both sides, right? Ogre, not so much. It's asymmetrical. It's that bit different from all the other ones in that there is an ogre and then the other person has to kind of beat the ogre.
Yeah, that's kind of the main setup for the game, and that sort of asymmetrical strategy game was very, very different when it was released in 1977, and it's still fairly different now, which is quite exciting. And the game that you're talking about of Ogre, that's kind of like the core set, and they would later go on, this is a game with 𝙒𝙤𝙬𝙬𝙬𝙬 Games, they would later go on to create a game called GV, which kind of expanded out on the everybody against the ogre formula by adding new rules and new units and lots of other good stuff like that. But yes, the core ogre experience is very asymmetrical.
That really set it apart. Even today, I should say, we are starting to see more and more games, particularly on computer, that are asymmetrical, and it's also becoming a thing in board games again. But in the 80s, I didn't see anything like this.
Yeah, I mean, in the kind of joke, I suppose, is that board games in general were kind of rubbish until the mid-90s. Like, that's the general rule of thumb, in that, you had stuff like Carcassonne, Settlers of Catan, and that kind of thing. Those came out, and suddenly it was like, oh, board games, these are things that aren't just, Mousetrap and Cluedo and Guess Who, which are all fine games, but they're not exactly particularly strategic or balanced or exciting in those ways. They're kind of kids' products, whereas those games really revolutionize things. And actually, the more we look back now on tabletop gaming history, we're starting to find these other games which had dedicated crowds at the time, and there was really good reason to, So there were games before this big board game revolution that we've had, and I think Ogre is among them as being, a high quality, very replayable, challenging game.
Well, and since we were talking about tabletop RPGs and stuff, or at least mentioned it, I feel like I should also mention the Ogre in this case. What you're using on the board game is tanks, and I wasn't clear. Is the Ogre like a fortress, or is it just a massive tank that you have to take down?
So it is it's a cybernetic tank. So it's this huge thing, which is like multiple tanks wide and tall, and it's this huge thing. And it is, it's essentially a rolling fortress onto the teeth with nuclear weapons and these amazing cruise missiles and all sorts of cannons and anti-infantry weapons, that sort of thing. And as the original 1977 Ogre kind of had this foundational story of this is what the Ogre is. It's this sort of sentient tank, so it can kind of think for itself to some degree. And then as Ogre and GV and Shockwave and some of the other expansions came out, they then built up on top of the canon, as it were, of what the actual story of Ogre is. And actually there's hugely, there's whole world wars and conflicts and different sections, different factions that take part in this big conflict. It's this one Ogre, it's armed to the teeth, and then everybody else is trying to stop it. And that's kind of, and they use tanks and hovercraft and infantry, very squishy infantry. The infantry do not last long, unfortunately. And that's kind of the general gist.
Yeah, just, I guess, for Dracoon's apologies. I should have said that earlier. When we say Ogre, a lot of people go, oh, it's a fantasy setting. No, it's 21st, 22nd century. So it is very much high-tech, future-tech based. And then this, rolling fortress on threads, which you'll see it on the board game and go, okay, we'll shoot at the threads, because one of the tactics is you can take out different pieces of it. And you take out the threads and go, yay, oh shit, it can still shoot everywhere.
So that's one of the things that has kept Ogre in the limelight amongst tabletop gamers for so long. So a lot of sort of strategic games rely on, or strategic games from back in the day were fairly, there was one way that you were going to win. And it was really, there weren't too many tactics, not too many options that you could actually implement. And then, but in this one, in the 1977 original, yes, so there are multiple different ways that you could handle the Ogre. So the actual, the top to bottom objective of what the game is, you have a quite long playing board that you're playing upon, or a folded out piece of paper if you have the literal 1977 original microgame, because it was all printed out on quite thin cardboard and pieces of paper. And it cost something like $3 as well. It's amazing. So basically your board is a long sort of hex grid, and the Ogre starts on one end and needs to get to the other end and destroy a command post. And what this is essentially the defenders have to destroy the tank before it gets there. But there's multiple ways that the defenders can do that. So, for example, the Ogre is this huge crushing tank, but its treads, as you mentioned, you can take them out. And if you can slow the Ogre to a stop, it means that they'll never be able to get to the command post, which means that you'll always win the game. So one of the options is, okay, let's just take out the treads. But that's actually quite difficult because it actually requires quite a high roll from the defenders to be able to do that. So you think, okay, well maybe I won't do that. Maybe I'll take out the main battery, which means that you can make sure you kind of cripple its defenses and its attacking. So you might want to focus on taking out the cannons that can destroy your own units. And again, if you can destroy those things, then that makes the game easier. So that's just two of the examples of the straightforward, sort of basic scenario of how you might want to approach that as a defender. And while that sets itself up as a fairly straightforward scenario, this is a game that, as I say, has been played for 40 years. And we encourage the people who really love the original tabletop version to come and talk and to play our video game, because that game's out now and it's out on Steam and people are talking about it. And in our forums and in our communities, you hear from people who have been playing this game for 40 years and have developed very unique strategies that you might not originally come to the table with. So, for example, one that I didn't know about before we launched the game, but our designers did, is there's a strategy in which you take these little hovercraft vehicles and they have this special phase where they can move after their first movement phase. So they're kind of the only vehicle that can really do this. And it means that they can get close to the ogre, do a bunch of damage, and then move away from the ogre, which means that you can go out of the range of the ogre's attacks. And there was this one strategy where somebody basically just had an all GV army, so this all hovercraft army, and they managed to take out the ogre completely and not let the ogre shoot them because they could get in close and then get away. So it was that would be really frustrating for an ogre player. But again, that's one of these strategies that's morphed and emanated out of 40 years worth of play, basically.
A nice bit of hit and run there. Yeah, but that's a valid military tactic. You move in, you hit a target, and you get the heck out before they can really retaliate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the thing. People have found all of these different strategies, and as more units, more different rules, more tile sets, more locations and map types, as more of these things were added on, what started as a really, really very, very good strategy game suddenly turned into something with loads of depth and loads of strategy, and something that's basically kept players, thinking about how that game works for literal decades. So it kind of is the progenitor to a lot of modern hex-based strategy video games and also tabletop games.
Yeah, playing it, I literally just played it again here before we got in here into this little chat. Again, it was putting me back into playing strategy games on computers 20 years ago on Commodore Amigas, 25 years ago, and it is at the core, all of them are the same to some degree, but they all have a little bit interesting variations. And seeing that this one actually just keeps on ticking 40 years later, and it is the second computer version of it, computerized adaptation.
Yes, that's correct. So there was a one by a company called Origins Systems way back in the day. I think this was like early 80s. And we certainly played that game for research. And it was really cool. It was a really, really cool old game back in the day. But it definitely, it just wasn't, fit for purpose for as a modern video game. We wanted to bring a lot of the UI niceties and lots of new things that we could bring, like, online multiplayer and scenario creator and, the ability to share your maps and all that good stuff. So yeah, this is the second game. And again, we're sort of celebrating that 40-year anniversary of Ogre. And the really cool thing is Steve Jackson and the line manager for Ogre over at Steve Jackson Games, which is a guy called 𝙤𝙤𝙬𝙗𝙗, they've been really heavily involved with this version. So there's like a campaign in our version which is totally unique, and it's something that's only in the video game version, but it's been made by people who, again, have been this is Steve Jackson's 77 classic, and it's him talking to us about how we're going to do a campaign in this new video game version, and it's brutal because like you have this you have this master game designer, this incredible legendary game designer basically, who's like, right, I'm going to do a campaign for you and you're going to try and take it on. And then so we release the game, and then you get those ogre diehards who've been playing it for however many years, and they come to the campaign and they're like, oh man, this is tough. And it's because the master basically has been like, okay, I'm going to give you a challenge. There's you're quite right about hex-based strategy games. Like they can feel quite similar, but I think Ogre distinguishes itself by it looks different. It's like retro sci-fi futuristic, and I think also this is the granddaddy basically.
That's really cool. For tabletop D&Ders like me, that would be like Gary Gygax consulting on the game that you're making. So that's pretty amazing. And you answered one of the other questions I had, which was if this was going to include any kind of a story campaign. So about how long does that run, and does it use a lot of the material that you'd mentioned earlier about some of the background material?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So well, it really does depend on like how good you are. I think we've had people who have said, "Oh yeah, I've managed to complete it in 8 hours," and then you've got some people who are like, "I'm 20 hours in and I'm like on level 7," and yeah, so it really does depend on how quickly you can pick up what the game is putting down. So the other really cool thing about the campaign is it kind of teaches you some of the really advanced high-level strategies through punishing you, basically. So the game is there's a whole bunch of additional elements that we've taken from versions of Ogre beyond that original core set and beyond 6th edition. So we based our rules on Ogre 6th edition, which is the latest version. We've also included stuff from GV and slightly further afield as well within the Ogre universe. Narratively, it is its own story, and it's very light on its story, but there is something there. And again, I would say this, the actual core, the core Ogre products have storytelling and that kind of thing, but it's not the be all and end all. It's not like, you mentioned Gygax, it's not the level of world creation of 30, 40, 50 pages of like here is the universe. That stuff is available, but it's not necessarily something that you would get with like a core set or something. So the video game version takes that and it tells a smaller story about a rogue AI ogre faction, and it sets it in quite late in the Ogreverse. So we can do some quite interesting things with AI tech and technology and the units that are actually in there. So, for example, we have scenarios whereby you can play, and there are city tiles, which is not something that you would play in the original Ogre. So city tiles were brought in later. There's a train that you can use. There are roads that you can move on, and that will make you move faster. And you can also target those roads to destroy them so that you can actually slow the progress of other units. There's a whole bunch of extra stuff that people who are familiar with that core game will go, oh, cool, this feels new. And some of it is new, and some of it is taken from sort of expansions and that sort of thing.
Then I kind of got to ask, when there's all these extra bits and pieces in, is there a way for players to make their own scenarios, their own maps, their own vehicles, their own, even if it's just color schemes? Could we make a, I don't know, Union Jack Ogre?
That sounds pretty exciting. You can make your own maps. That's definitely something you can do. You can create your own scenarios. So you can basically create a map and say, right, these are all of the hex tiles that I want on this. And already there's, in our community, there's a bunch of maps that you can get hold of via Steam Workshop, and obviously all of it's free, there's a really dedicated core of Ogre players who I'm thinking of one specific community member at the moment who has basically made, 5 or 6 maps, and they are all absolutely incredible. Very thematic. He's used the map editor in like a really creative way to produce things that feel really like on theme, as I say. When it comes to actually creating your own models, that's not something that we've got in the game at the moment. If you want British-ish troops, then I think unfortunately there's no British Union Jack ogre. That's definitely something we should totally get in there, isn't it? That sounds great. But yeah, there's nothing like that at the moment. There's no way to sort of paint your models or anything like that. We have been asked whether or not that's something that we want to do, whether or not that's something we could do. And again, it's all about we're very active with our community, and we really like listening to what they have to say and what they want. And a lot of the game has been improved over the last 2 months since the game was out based on community feedback. So obviously when people ask us for stuff, we add it to a big old list called here are the cool things that we might want to do with Ogre. And then, if there's enough push for it, or, if there's enough demand, then we go for it. So for example, one of the things that we had straight out the gate was we would love the ability to have a Mac version, because we just launched on Windows. And we were like, cool, let's just do a Mac version. There were a couple of UI changes that people really wanted, like multi-unit selection and movement. And we were like, right, okay, that sounds like a really reasonable thing to ask for. So again, that was something that we got in there. So if people are like, hey, I want you to sell me a Union Jack ogre, or even better yet, the ability to paint a model for an ogre, that is something that obviously we're more than happy to hear about.
And I have to say, thank you for making the Mac version, because that was literally what I was playing earlier. No, but it's nice to see that, there are some options for the players to extend the gameplay, because if we take it down to the most simple and go back to the core, as you mentioned earlier, there's a huge tank on one side, there's a lot of small tanks on the other side. That doesn't sound like it would keep ticking. It turns out it does, 40 years, but then still, computer players might be a bit more fickle than board game players.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you raise, actually. So one of the things that we found when we were making the game and talking to the community about what they wanted, and when the game came out and the feedback that we got, is the game that we've made is a game that the Ogre community has really rallied behind, and they are, this is the game, right? Like, this is their way of playing their friend who is, 7 hours time difference away from them across the world. Like, they're able to play multiplayer games with them, and they're able to make these maps and share them with people. And there are a lot of very creative people in the Ogre community, so they've really grabbed onto it. And a lot of other people who are either interested in the history of tabletop or just digital tabletop players, they've also found the game and gone, oh, this is really cool. Then there's another group of gamers who are sort of, I would say, strategy war gamers, strategy war game video gamers. And they've found the game, and again, it's in their wheelhouse, because there's a lot of strategy and tactical nuance that you have to be able to take into account. There's quite a lot of maths. A lot of the game is about mitigating risk. So that really appeals to the kind of people who, are into these, those old school SSI, strategy war games. And that group there, which has, when they found it, has gone, oh, cool, this is really, really cool, and jumped in and enjoyed it. When we've marketed it, because that's a big part of my job. So I'm the marketing manager at 𝙎𝙧𝙚𝙬𝙚𝙨, and the producer on this is my colleague Nina. We've been talking about this a lot, and when we marketed it to video game fans, like, let's say, for example, people who like action games rather than strategy games, we found that it was a very different audience. So they would come to this game and think, well, this is quite a straightforward strategy game. I can't quite see the differences here. I can't quite understand why this would keep me entertained. Whereas you go to these hardcore strategy gamers, and they're like, oh yeah, no, I get this. Yeah, this is my jam. And we've got people who have logged 200 hours into the game already. And, that is absolutely incredible. So yeah, it's really interesting. The other really cool thing, and this was really awesome. So like I've played video games since I was like 3 years old, and I've never stopped playing them. And that's a long time. No, that's not. That's like 29 years now. Oh, that's depressing. Super depressing. Okay. Anyway,
You're the youngest one here, then.
am I? Oh god.
Let's say
Oh god. Sorry.
40s, late 30s here.
Oh my word. Really? Okay. Well, that's all right then. You're fine. But one of the things we found with some of our audience that were sort of more tabletop oriented is they've not played video games in quite a while, or they play very specific things. So one of the amazing questions that we got just before we launched the game was, so we said, we had all this marketing material, and it said stuff like, and you'll be able to get Ogre on Steam. And we got questions, like perfectly valid questions from people who would say things like, what's Steam? Is Steam a website?
Wow.
And we forget, as people who play video games, that like PlayStations and like playing on Steam and all that sort of stuff. Like, because we're super into it, we immediately know what Steam Workshop is, right? Like, we already know that that's an online service where you can make a thing in a game and share it with other people. But that was something we actually had to tell a good chunk of our community what it was about and why that was cool. We had some people asking whether, and this was another amazing question. We had somebody who asked whether or not there would be sound in the game, because the last video game they played was the previous Ogre, and the previous Ogre was on Apple II. So, you're in this really interesting situation when you're making a game like this, whereby you want to make this ultra cool, very, very, very faithful strategy game using all of this modern technology. But at the same time, you also kind of have to bring this audience that might be slightly unfamiliar or maybe even totally new to video games with you. And that was one of the challenges that we had to face when we were putting this thing together.
That does sound like a very varied group. I mean, from one end, the computer gamers, all the way over to people who really just stuck with tabletop and board games, etc.
Right. Yeah.
That's a bit of a marketing challenge. Let's put it that way.
It is rather.
And now we're trying to get it out to people who listen to podcasts.
Yes, absolutely. Well, here's the thing. People who listen to the podcasts are the best people. That's the... They're the best. They're the smart ones. Smart and attractive,
Save that clip.
I always think. But you're right. It is a marketing challenge, because you not only have to... It was really interesting. We didn't have to do a whole bunch. Like, we always knew Ogre was going to be a good video game, because Ogre is a great tabletop game. So to the people who love Ogre, we didn't have to convince them that it was a good game. What we had to convince them was, A, we'd done a good implementation of that game, and B, to sign up for Steam. We had to convince them that actually, jumping on board and that their PC could run Steam and could run this game and could do all of these things, and that actually, yes, they would enjoy the game in a digital format. And I think we've done a good job of that. And again, we've talked to people like yourselves, we've talked to sort of more traditional press and that kind of stuff, and that was a huge part of what we were doing. It was all about talking about how it was a faithful adaptation, because basically the game's great, so why mess with success, if you know what I mean?
Well, on that one, if I may, now Drag and I go back to other games that are also implementing or computerizing board games, pen and paper games, etc. And we've seen a side of that was not pretty. Particularly one where the fans were going, oh yay, there's a computerized game of a game that I like. There's something here that I can go to my computer, I can play with my friends online, people I haven't seen who moved across country or across continent. And then they come back and just absolutely hate it, because there's some part that isn't faithful, there's some part they feel is wrong, there's a color scheme that's off, there's a sound that didn't sound the way they wanted it. It's a risk doing what you did, and I mean, kudos for picking it up, but it was a bit brave of you, no?
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, I think... So here's the thing. So 𝙎𝙤𝙬𝙚 makes... our thing is digital tabletop and strategy games, and we work with IP a lot. So, for example, you know, our previous 3 games are a strategy game and 2 adaptations of Games Workshop games. So, Chainsaw Warrior and Last Days of Old Earth, and the follow-up to Chainsaw Warrior. So we're used to this kind of thing, and we work a lot with adapting tabletop. We've also made our own physical tabletop games as well. So again, like I say, we're very comfortable with taking an IP and taking a tabletop game and then going, okay, how does this work in a digital format? So to go on a wild tangent here. So, for example, I'm currently the producer on a game called Dark Future, which is an adaptation of a Games Workshop game from back in the 80s, and it's like car combat and deserts and all that good stuff. And with that game, we decided that we didn't want to convert the tabletop game wholly. We wanted to take that amazing world where you're in the desert and you're fighting these utterly vicious gang cults, and it's really like tongue-in-cheek British 80s, like 2000 AD-esque dystopian fiction humor, and then make it into a cool strategy car combat game. We basically made that decision of, you know what, we don't want to take these tabletop rules, we want to do our own thing. With Ogre, we, you know, sat down, got the box out, started looking through it, and we were like, and the owner of the company, who was also the owner of 𝙎𝙤𝙬𝙬𝙗 Digital, who was also heavily involved in the making of the game, has been playing Ogre since he was, I think, 5 years old. So he knew the game inside out, right? So we're very comfortable with these games. And when we were taking this Ogre box out and figuring out what it is, we actually just looked at it and went, this is just a game, this is just a great strategy game. Why on earth would you try and mess with this? What we want to do is convert that, you know, almost entirely wholesale. There were 1 or 2 little areas we had to change ever so slightly, based on just things that computers aren't very good at. So, for example, there's one very, very, very minor rule in, I think it's GEV, whereby in a very specific scenario, the ruling is essentially that 2 players work out who does what. Like, there's no like formal rule set as to how a very specific thing works out. So we just took that out and we automated it because we just thought, you know what, we don't want to slow the game down, because we wanted to make the game genuinely like asynchronous. We didn't want players to have to just sit there and play all together at the same time. But you're right, it is a risk when you do that. I think we found as a studio that a lot of people will say, this game would make this tabletop game would make a really good video game. And actually, when you start to break it down, you think, no, actually they're not. You know, I think games like, a really simple example would be Snap, right? Like, if you wanted for some reason, if you wanted to make a digital tabletop version of Snap, and aim it at like 9-year-olds or whatever it is, there's no real... The fun of Snap is you are head-to-head with somebody, and it's really, really tense and physical, and it's you physically slamming your hand on the table and going snap and shouting really loud. Like, that's a huge part of why Snap is fun. So if you wanted to do... So I think there are some tabletop games which just straight up don't work as tabletop games. And then also, I think being too dogmatic with rules and faithfulness, sometimes it just doesn't work in the favor of the game that's being made. So, I don't know. Let's say, for example, again, like let's take a game that, like Dungeons and Dragons, right? So Dungeons and Dragons is an amazing world, like absolutely incredible. And as a role-playing game, pen and paper system, it is stupendous. There's a reason that why wizards are the top of their game with that stuff. But if you were to translate that game literally into a video game, I don't think it would. First of all, I think it would be impossible because it would just be there would be so many different systems and subsystems and menus and lots of different things to just get a pen and paper role playing game working. Whereas when you look at stuff like Neverwinter Nights or Baldur's Gate, they don't take everything from Dungeons and Dragons. They take the world and the setting and the characters and even some of the storylines, and they take some of the systems that really work and they put them into a slightly different form. And they say, okay, this is a computer role playing game. And I think that is a much more sensible way of tackling that sort of system. And I think the reason that you have to really think about whether or not you stay completely faithful to a game is simply because you can end up making a game that is a poor video game because it's a great tabletop game. And tabletop rules sometimes just don't translate into digital. So yeah, there is that. And then the flip side of that is, if you're making a game and it has got the name Dungeons and Dragons on it, you expect to see at least some dungeons and at least one dragon, right? Like you would want to see some of that stuff, because if you make a Dungeons and Dragons game and it's an Angry Birds clone, that's not really in the spirit of what D&D is. So I think it's about figuring out what that IP is all about, and it's about talking to your audience and saying, this is what we are excited about the game you love, and this is the kind of game that we're going to make. And we just straight up said to the Ogre community, yeah, we're just going to make the game that you love because why not? Like, it's right and it works and we can translate it. But if we'd have gone, oh yeah, we're going to make a game, we're going to make it like a tank, like we're going to make like Worms, but it's got an ogre in it, like that probably wouldn't have gone down quite as well. Right, but I think it's about figuring out what the key thing in that IP actually is.
Well, and I'm gonna switch back to something that you mentioned earlier, just because I could probably sit here and talk and debate for half the day or more about D&D games and systems and stuff. But you had mentioned you guys released on PC and then on Mac. Were you guys looking to release on any additional systems, Linux, consoles, anything like that?
So the thing with Linux is there's a horrible reality of Linux, which is there's a very vocal community who will go onto every Steam game page and say, where's the Linux version? And you go, oh, okay. And then you make the Linux version and then no one buys it. There are Valve releases Linux stats. Valve releases lots of really interesting stats, and unfortunately, Linux is a really small minority. So we've not got to the point of success with the Ogre game itself on Windows and Mac, where it would make financial sense to release on Linux. Because if we say, oh, well, if we make like 0.5% of what we make on Windows, but on Linux, at this point, it's probably not worth us doing it on Linux, which is, again, it's a shame because we'd love it to be on as many platforms as possible. But also we are making commercial art, as it were. So there has to be a sort of financial reason as to why we would do it. On other systems is really interesting. So we've had people say that they would like a touchscreen version, and we've had people who would say that they would like to see it on a console. That is certainly an interesting thing. And we're not saying no. So, yeah, I think basically we're at a point where we're definitely taking feedback from our community. And if there's enough of a call of it, if everybody who's bought the Steam version goes, oh, I'd really like to play this on my Nintendo Switch, then it would probably make sense for us to do something like that. But right now, there's nothing announced.
And I don't know that it would be enough of a sizable community to do it, but this game looks like it could be something that could also be fun in VR or even augmented reality.
Yeah, so we do. Have like loads of VR and AR kits, and we had a whole bunch of the PSVR stuff for another project. And yeah, I think it would be fun, right? Like if you could like pick up an individual piece and move it to the next area, that might be quite cool. Yeah, I mean, as I say, like there's all sorts of stuff that we could do with this kind of thing, and it really is about it's about listening to the feedback and what people want. You know, if people are happy with keyboard and mouse and all that sort of stuff, then great. And if not, if they're like, hey, this would be awesome if I was in a virtual reality, like, okay, cool. So who knows?
I think I'll second the AR version, augmented reality.
Yeah.
Just being able to lay out a piece of paper on the table and have the computer overlay all the pieces, etc., and do the animations.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
That's what I
that would
want.
be pretty cool, wouldn't it? Oh,
But short of that, because not everybody have AR, something where I could take my TV, lay it down on the table, use the TV as a table. Does that seem a little bit more far-fetched?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we could have a lay it down on the TV mode. Yeah. Well, no, that's amazing. I remember there was a game back in the day called. It's not a strategy game. It's a game called 𝙎𝙪𝙚𝙬𝙚𝙬𝙧, and it's like a bullet hell shooter. And they had this really nuts mode in it, whereby because it was a vertical shooting game, which meant that the whole screen, the arcade cabinet was horizontal, was vertical. So it was like an A4 piece of paper. You could get your TV and turn it 90 degrees, and the game would play out like that as well. And I remember getting my CRT television, like one of those super old school massive televisions, and turning it on its side physically, and just sitting there going, "This is amazing. This is the future." So yeah, maybe there's something in that with Ogre as well.
That's how I would want to ultimately play. And I'm sorry, I'm old, but I'm also a nerd. I would love to just have a flat screen TV as a table to play my Dungeons and Dragons, to play my tabletop games, Settlers of Catan, you name it. Just having that and move it around with a little bit of touchscreen. But on that one, the first thing I thought when looking at this game was just tablet, because there is something about having that tactile responsiveness and being able to move it around, but every tablet I've ever seen would be too small for this game.
Yeah, again, that's one of the challenges of taking a game from one platform to another. So one of the things that we are very careful with as a studio is we're very, very cautious when we talk about where a game is going to go. We really think about it. So there are a lot of people, and you see this a lot on Kickstarter actually. You see a lot of these indies who will, for very positive reasons, will say, oh yeah, we'll do a Nintendo Switch version, and we'll do a PS4 version, and a version for your N-Gage and your Gizmondo and like all of this sort of stuff. And you sort of think, and it's great, it's really great that they have that aspiration to do it. However, when you're making a game, especially a very menu-driven game, like a digital tabletop game, your user interface has to be very specifically set up to work with the interface you have, so mouse and keyboard. So we would have people sort of saying, "Oh, you can just really quickly chuck it onto a tablet." And actually, you're right. Like, you then have to start thinking about, well, would it fit on a tablet? Like, in the current scheme of things, like, would all the size of the buttons work? How would I zoom in and out? Like, would it be pinch, or would it be some sort of tap thing? How would I flow through the menus? How would I highlight something rather than do a selection? So, for example, you can right click on a hex while you have a unit selected, and it will give you a preview of what that tile actually is rather than move the unit to that tile. So we'd have to do lots and lots of thinking about how that game would work on touchscreens. I don't think it's impossible. I certainly think that, again, that's one of those things that we hear people saying, that would be really cool to play on my Android tablet. But again, it would be that would be quite a significant chunk of work to get that running. But again, if people are excited about that sort of stuff, then we listen to what they want, basically.
Well, a quick UI question then. How do you zoom in and out? The game zoomed in nicely because there was an event. The Ogre was murdering my people. I could not for the love of me zoom back out again.
Okay, that's interesting. So usually you are on like mouse wheel, and that's... Yes, basically everything's usually on mouse wheel. That sounds terrifying if you can't zoom out. That is definitely worth reporting as a bug. That's the first I've heard of that. But yeah, I mean, like with mouse and keyboard, we really specifically wanted to figure out how to make playing Ogre as quick and as easy as possible. And again, user interface is something that takes a lot of time and effort and thought. And getting it just right can be the difference between a really great strategy game and a game that is a really great strategy game that you can't play because it's really awkward and tedious to play, to actually interact with. So that was one of the things that we spent quite a lot of time on.
Well, and G plays on Mac, so G, have you got one of them old Mac mice that doesn't have the scroll wheel?
I tried scrolling, I tried pinching, I tried everything. It's probably me, but it is a bit. I don't know if I don't want to sound negative, but the user interface is relatively Spartan. And it is a game where if you don't know Ogre already, you're lost.
Yes.
You go, oh, yay, single player, and you'll start playing, and you have no idea what's going on, except there's this huge tank about to try and kill you.
Yeah, I mean, basically that's one of the drawbacks of having a game that is not necessarily narrative-based. So one of the things that you see with a lot of modern video games now, especially ones that have a story, is the first hour will essentially be a glorified tutorial, right? So done in the days where you have like a platform adventure game where you have literally a tutorial of this is how you jump, this is how you shoot, this is how you do this. Now it's Nathan Drake spends the first hour wandering around quite slowly and jumping around areas where there isn't a lot of danger and getting into gunfights where there's not really that many enemies. When you have a game like Ogre, that's much more challenging. So we do have a tutorial in the game, and it runs players through the basics of the game and introduces concepts. But you're right, like there is a lot of game to take on here. And that was a decision that we had to make between a faithfulness of game where we basically say to the Ogre audience, jump in, like the water is warm, or we pivot it much more towards an audience that doesn't know Ogre, and we would have had to make that campaign really easy. Like for an Ogre player, it would have been, sort of crushingly easy for the first couple of campaign levels to really very gently move people into this world. I think it's a fair criticism of the game that there is a lot to take on straight away, but also I think that to the type of person who this game attracts generally, I think the kinds of people who gravitate towards a like a Hearts of Iron or a one of these like ultra intense war games, something like that, or even tabletop games, I think that kind of person is willing to sort of run up against the wall a little bit and figure out and have a slightly higher difficulty curve than most games. But yeah, I think it's perfectly. I think it's a perfectly valid criticism, but it's almost a criticism of a game that we weren't quite trying to make. If you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I come from the point that as a person who's not, as a person who picks this up and go, ooh, this looks interesting, as opposed to, ooh, I know this will be interesting. That person is going to play it and going to go back to Steam and say, gee, I'd like a refund.
That's the thing. And that is, that's one of the things that we obviously we wanted to try and sort of mitigate. And one of the ways that we've done that is, again, we've got that tutorial, we've got we've got a really dedicated community section where we've got our community manager who's jumping in there and answering questions. So we've got people who have played strategy games before and have never played Ogre. And they dive straight into the Steam community and they're like, I have no idea what this specific thing is. And you'll have people who love Ogre immediately answering it, going, oh, yeah, it's this. And they're like, oh, okay. And they go back and they start playing again. And they're like, oh, okay, that was fine. And that kind of, it's almost like having a community of people whereby, when you're playing a board game and you think to yourself, you sit down, you open up one of these really big board games, like one of these big, like meaty Twilight Imperium kind of things, and you open up that big old box and you start looking at the manual, and the first thing you do, it's that second emotion that you get. The first emotion is, oh, look at this amazing game, look at all the fun I'm going to have. And then you get to the manual and you're like, I'm going to have to do a lot of reading and thinking for the next 2 hours before I even get to play this thing. And what you really want is your friend who already knows how to play the game to go, oh yeah, okay, chuck the book away. I'm going to teach you how to play this game. That's kind of what you want. And unfortunately, we can't teleport our community member, our community manager into everybody's room when they're playing the game. So what we wanted to do was encourage a Steam community that was really vibrant and active, and people talking about how to play the game, about strategies. So, as you say, like one of the things that you get at first blush is this is quite a lot of new things. I don't really know how to play this. I don't really know what these terms are. But there's a second wave that comes after that of, I don't know why I'm losing. And that second wave is just as problematic. It's one of those things where you need to have somebody who's able to say, oh yeah, what you want to do is you want to use that second GV turn to keep your GV moving away once they've attacked the ogre on their turn. And again, it's having that kind of safety net that we've tried to generate so as to avoid that situation that you're talking about, where people turn up, they've got no idea how to play the game, and then they're like, well, sod this, refund, because that's obviously very frustrating for us from a game development studio.
I can confirm the whole, why is the ogre just massacring all my units?
Yeah, I mean that is a common question, because the ogre is brutal,
and it has to be, because we're not used to games where one side just have a unit that can massacre.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'd say probably not used to that in strategy games, but I know there have been some shooting games where it's things like that, 4 versus 1 or something like that. But with regards to the community, do you already have, or have you looked into setting up any kind of a Discord server for people to chat in there about strategies and questions?
Yeah, we're kind of thinking about how we want to move forward with our community at the moment, and we're keeping the conversation on Steam at the moment, just because we like everything that works there. And we've managed to talk to the tabletop audience and say, right, this is how you use this. This is the Steam space, and this is a really great space to have that conversation. What we're slightly concerned about of like moving on to a Discord would be okay, here's this brand new system where like we're going to split this player base, and like some of you are only going to stay on Steam and some of you are going to go and chat over here. However, it is something we're looking into for our future games. So at least one of our future titles has a multiplayer aspiration. That's quite vague, but never mind. And so that's something that we're definitely looking into at the moment.
Peter, just one thing: Discord integration.
Discord integration.
Discord allows you to integrate the Discord server features like chat and voice chat into games.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, so here's the other thing. Discord actually kind of kicked off about like and became like really popular a fair number of months after we sort of put the initial design for the game down. And one of the things that and as a producer, I get quite wary of is when you've set down a design and you start adding new features, because it's always like, this new piece of text come out, we would love to be able to do this, and we're just like, yeah, that would be really cool, but like we haven't planned to include that. Discord was kind of one of those things whereby we looked at that and thought to ourselves, okay, that's cool, next game. So yeah, maybe you'll see it in a future title or something like that. I mean, heck, we'd love to be able to put in like all sorts of features, like Twitch integration. That'd be awesome. or the ability to, who knows, like tweet out your tweet out a screenshot of your best victory or that final blow against the ogre or what have you. But yeah, it's one of those things of.
I was thinking, the moment somebody gets owned by that ogre, just being able to vent that frustration with a bunch of ogre players.
Yeah.
It's because I hate you lot for being able to kill this huge thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That'd be amazing. We should also probably, what we should do? We should do a physical version as well, where we put a stress toy, an ogre stress toy, in with it, so that when you get absolutely flattened by, the Mark III, you can just go, just stress it. Mind you, but then we'd have to offer replacements, because I think you'd break it more often than not, basically.
Is it going to be like one of those little ones where you squeeze it and it makes a little squeaky noise with the eyes popping out?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think that'd be nicely on brand. Yeah, why not?
My mind went somewhere else when you said physical, and I mentioned a bunch of middle-aged men running around inside a big warehouse. One of them with a lot of baseball bats, and the others with small baseball bats and plastic thingies, and literally playing.
Yeah.
Well, he did say stress toy, so I was thinking about one of those little things like you watched Dirt Gently, the guy using the little squeeze toy that pops the eyes out.
Yeah. Exactly that, but for ogres and cannons. That'd be nicely on brand, I reckon.
Just one other thing. I know a lot of ogre players will say that's overpowered. But could we give the infantry guys an option to shoot bacon just to stop so the tracks don't work, so the ogre gets stuck? Like, here's a lot of bacon grease. You're not moving anywhere.
Now, listen, I've got to be honest. It's a feature that has been requested multiple times. I don't know. I don't know whether or not I don't know whether or not the Unity engine is powerful enough for bacon. It's too much. It's too much. And you're right. It would be OP. I mean, if you think about it. If you genuinely sit down and think about it, what you could basically have this additional victory condition of just you fire enough bacon at the ogre that the sentient cybernetic tank realizes there's better things in life to do than destroy things. You could have a fry up.
Yeah, I mean it works. Or just if you can lure it into a grove of bacon trees and it just refuses to drive through them.
Yeah, exactly. Because why would you harm precious bacon?
Or maybe there could be a bacon power-up for your infantry so they all become like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando and become a little more powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Are you suggesting that we should add maybe some sort of bacon-based loot crate system into the game?
Okay. Well, we talked a little bit about Ogre. We've talked a little bit about what you guys do. A slightly very different question. Your Christmas cards.
Yes. Yeah, we have. Well, I mean, as any good quality, self-respecting game studio, we decided to do our own line of Christmas cards this year to purchase. What would you like to know about our Christmas cards?
It's just I looked at them and Santa looks a little bit weird this year. Looks different.
Yeah. So we did a Kickstarter called the Cthulhu Christmas Cards, and again, the chap who owns the company, who's at the top of the company, is a bit of an obsessive when it comes to Cthulhu, and I must admit I am too. And so he had a really great thought this year of what would be really cool if we made some Christmas cards with Cthulhu on it. And we were like, okay, cool. And then we thought, let's just do a Kickstarter for them. So we did a quick Kickstarter for these Cthulhu Christmas cards, and inside there's a sort of, a warm season's greetings sort of message, as if it were written by a deep one, for example, and sort of, all sorts of gibbering madness across the entire thing. So some of the art is there's Cthulhu Santa. There's the Cthulhu babies who are sat in their stockings waiting for Santa. I'm assuming Cthulhu Santa to arrive. So there's lots of really fun art and stuff like that. Now, one of the things that nobody has picked up on yet, and this is you've got to keep this to yourselves. So it's a good thing that we're not recording a podcast. What people haven't done is gone, I wonder why they're doing a Cthulhu Christmas card. So I'll sort of leave that with you. Because, why would a game studio make something to do with Cthulhu that was unrelated to a video game? It's an odd one, isn't it?
I will admit, I was pondering a little bit whether this was, a PR thing. But then it was a Kickstarter, figured, okay, perhaps not. You're just being...
I couldn't possibly tell you until maybe, I guess, February. So
we're lining up the next interview already. Sounds good to me.
Drag, you are fast. I'll just say, I'm loving the Cthulhu Center with "You've been naughty."
I like the fact that, that's the thing as well. Like, if Cthulhu rocks up and says that you're naughty, you're in for a real bad time, because most of the time Cthulhu doesn't care about humanity whatsoever. So if he takes a specific interest in your activities, you're in for a bad time.
Well, there's something, if he's saying you've been naughty, isn't that a little bit positive, from his point of view?
No, Cthulhu, no, this is the thing with Cthulhu. Cthulhu is neither evil nor good. Cthulhu doesn't care. Cthulhu is to humans as humans are to ants. Like, humans don't care if they accidentally step on an ant. They just wouldn't know. They would do a terrible act to that ant by stepping on it, but they wouldn't know. And they also weren't doing it on purpose. They also wouldn't think it was either good or bad. Cthulhu is exactly the same. Cthulhu is, this incredibly powerful being that doesn't really even acknowledge that humans are an issue whatsoever. It's
but he's acknowledged that you exist. You've done something.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Even if it's naughty by human standard, you've done something to get his attention, him to rock up and say, "You've been naughty." So you've.
Oh yeah.
Power-wise, something has happened. That relationship between the ant and the human.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, if you can get Cthulhu's attention, you've done something either very good or very bad.
Well, and the one I had to ask about, have you ever read any of the old, I think it's Bill Watterson, Calvin and Hobbes comic strips? So the snowman one, was that in any way inspired by some of Calvin's snowman designs?
I couldn't possibly say. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing. Like, one of the fun things about Cthulhu is that it is a monster that nobody owns. So everybody has a slightly different interpretation of what Cthulhu is. That's why you see games like, let's say Delta Green, for example, which is a pen and paper role-playing game it's sort of like pulpy Cthulhu role-playing. And that's a very different vision to what Lovecraft was doing. But they're both sort of also equally valid, because Cthulhu is everything. It's everything. There's like a feeling and a tone to Cthulhu. And what I really like to see is people take on what Cthulhu is and then do something slightly different with it. Kind of a little bit like slightly more grim Norse mythology, like taking on that sort of the epic and the hero, and changing it for a different time. That's one of the things I really love about Cthulhu itself. It's weird that I've done loads of research on it, isn't it? But who knows?
We have no idea why that could be. But it's good that you have a hobby.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, Drag, I'm looking a little bit at the clock here. We might have run over already. Are you ready for what Bamm keeps, for some reason, calling the penultimate question?
I wondered if we were going to use that term or if you were going to leave that in last year. All right. Well, one thing we always like to ask each one of our guests, because that's just one of the things we do here. We love to talk about beer and bacon, is, what kind of bacon do you like? How would you like it prepared? And what kind of beer, cider, whiskey, or other type of drink would you pair with said bacon?
Oh, man. Okay. So, being a very limp-wristed left-wing liberal, I would go with a locally sourced, ethically produced rasher of bacon from my neck of the woods, just in Somerset. So there is a farm out in 𝙬𝙬𝙬𝙬𝙬, which is just out near my way, where they just make just raise these incredible animals and they have an amazing time, and then they get slaughtered for our satisfaction. So I'd have one of those, just like prepared, not smoked, just straight up bacon rasher. And then how would it be prepared? I think people who grill are monsters. So I think you'd have to have it fried. Well, look, I'm sorry. All right, I've got some pretty extreme opinions. Okay, so I think I would fry it, but I would fry it in a little bit of butter, just a tiny amount of butter, just to kind of get that pan sizzling. And I would probably chuck that onto a plate with the rest of my delicious fried breakfast, proper English full breakfast, except for that tomato that can die in a fire. And then the drink. So again, being a bit of a convert to the ways of southwestern living, I would have a cider, because we actually make like proper full-on cider in the southwest. There's a.
Well, didn't you say Somerset? Isn't that pretty much the best part of the UK for cider?
Oh yeah. It's the best place for two things: one, cider, and two, cheddar, because cheddar's in Somerset. And cheddar, as we all know, is the greatest cheese in the world. Basically, there is a manufacturer of a bottle of cider called Old Rosie, and so I think I'd probably have a nicely chilled Old Rosie cider with that. But then it'd be breakfast. Oh no. Okay. Well, it's an all-day breakfast, so I'd be having it in the evening, and I'd be having it with a cider, I think.
Well, I think your breakfast would be the middle of my night, so there you go. It's 5 o'clock
so that's
somewhere,
fine.
right?
It's exactly. It's breakfast everywhere, somewhere. Yes.
Well, one of the things I always like to ask people when they answer that question is one of my favorites is maple bacon, and I love to have, like when I'm having pancakes and stuff, I put peanut butter on them. And I've gone to a couple of places here when they make burgers. They put bacon on the burger, and you can get like peanut butter or peanut butter and jelly on the burger. And I know it sounds like a strange combination, but if you get the opportunity, definitely try some peanut butter with your bacon, because the sweet and savory, man, it goes so well together. It's so tasty.
Oh man, that sounds so good. Okay, I'm gonna give you my top tip as well for sort of slightly indulgent foods. Do you have something called Yorkshire puddings?
I have.
Or am I being the most British person in the world right now?
I've heard of them, but I've never tried it.
Okay, well, if you ever get a chance, you can make them at home as well. They're actually quite easy to make. You make Yorkshire puddings, if you can, and if you've got, to your British listeners, get some Aunt Bessie's, chuck them in the microwave, but once they're all heated, what you want to do is get some ice cream topping. So that stuff that you put it over the top of ice cream, and then it's like a caramel, and it sort of solidifies a little bit when you put it on top of ice cream. It was something back in the 80s. You chuck that in the middle of the Yorkshire pudding, and it's this savoury sweet combination that is just absolutely delightful.
Man, I gotta say, it's a good thing that I don't live over where you live, because between the cider and the food that you're describing, I'd be even chubbier than I already am.
Yeah, I mean, dude, seriously, I'm starting to put it on. So yeah, I'm gonna have to either move or I don't know. I'm gonna have to give up. I can't give it up though. No, that's it. I'm just gonna like lean into it. That's it.
I love good tasting food too much to give it up. I just have to start exercising more.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, yeah, no, that is the third option, isn't it? I suppose I could just go and exercise. But what? But that would take up video game time. All right, okay, well, maybe I'll do that.
Drag, just a small observation. If you move to the UK, you would have the problem that the amount of food you get served every time is about half as much as in the US. So
maybe I wouldn't have to exercise so much.
But you're making me think I need to go try out that cider. Old Rosie, you said. Do you know if they even export it? Because I'm down in... Well, you're from the UK, so I shouldn't say that I'm in Belgium, because that makes you think Brexit, and we just start a screaming fight.
Yeah, then we're... by the way, just on that, sorry. Everyone in the UK has no idea how that's going, why that's happening. It's just awful. And I visited Europe late last year. And literally, so I was in Paris, And as soon as people found out we were British, they immediately just thought, like, you are the worst. It was just like, yeah, sorry. Like,
we have a junior member who also had that, nobody knows really what Brexit is. So I gave him an explanation from the EU side, or, from the mainland side.
Yeah.
And I think I made him cry.
Yeah, it's good fun. It's typical sort of it's that sort of like it's sort of that old blighty spirit of we can do it by ourselves. And unfortunately, I don't know if we can. So
well, we could literally talk for 2 more hours about this. I'm sure.
Okay.
We shouldn't. I'll just say, I hope even by then you still keep exporting some of your ciders, because the ones we get down here are not good. We can get Strongbow.
Strongbow, really? Oh no, chuck that in the bin.
I actually like that one.
No, right, okay. Well, we'll organise some. I'll give you a list.
But I'm gonna go out and look for Old Rosie, see if I can find it. And you know what? Bacon and cheddar for me just works fine. I'll stick to that. Our editor's gonna have to do some chopping on this one because, things happened. Peter, it was awesome having you on. I've been enjoying playing Ogre again. It's even just playing solo on a computer works fine for me. And I'm gonna make Drac play it because I'm on a Mac and Drac has a PC with some expensive graphics card thingy in it that he can record better graphics for the YouTube version. So he's going to enjoy it. I hope. Beyond that, all the best.
I hope so.
I hope so. I'm really glad to hear that, and I'm really glad that you took the chance to play it and to invite me on. It's been lovely.
Given those Christmas cards, we might be asking you on again later. But yeah, to all our listeners, really go out and check out the game if you're interested in strategy games of really any kind. This one, as Peter said, is a bit of the granddaddy of these strategic games on the board game of the asymmetrical kind. Yes, there were some that predates it, but this is one of those that really kept ticking. Either check out the board game or check out the digital version because it seems to play pretty okay. There's some UI things that could be improved. I think I mentioned that, and be ready for a slightly uphill learning curve. I think it's worth it. I think it is worth sitting down and experiencing this game. And if you got a mate, get them to get it as well. So you can play 2 people, try and play it against each other. 'Cause I think that's where the fun really starts. The scenarios are good, but the fun is in interacting with each other.
Well, I've definitely enjoyed having you on, and I'm looking forward to taking a look at the game here. So we'll reach out again, I guess, in a couple months, see if we can get you back on for what you have coming up in the future.